For thousands of years, one story has been told about the people of Iran, that they are descended from a noble, ancient race, pure blood, unbroken lineage, a civilization that rose from one proud source and never mixed with anyone else. That story is in their poetry, in their national pride, in the name they gave themselves, Aryan. But in 2016, a team of scientists drilled into a 10,000-year-old skeleton found inside a cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. And what they pulled out of that bone destroyed the story completely. Not just part of the story, the whole thing. The DNA inside that ancient skeleton did not match what anyone expected. It pointed to a people who had never been given a name in history books. A people who had been living in Iran for thousands of years before the Persians, before the Aryans, before any empire was ever built. And here is the part that hits hardest. Their descendants are still alive today. That they're living in Iran right now. They just don't know it yet. My name is, and this channel is where buried history gets dug back up. If you are someone who loves ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and the science of who we really are, hit subscribe right now. Because we do this every single week. And before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? And have you ever done a DNA ancestry test? What did it tell you? I read every single comment. Tell me below. Now, let's go back 10,000 years, because the real story of Iran does not begin with kings or conquests. It begins with a woman, in a cave, high up in the mountains, and nobody knew she existed until scientists found her bones. Her name was never recorded. No one left a written word about her people, but her DNA survived. She lived approximately 10,000 years ago in a place called Ganj Dareh, a small settlement in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. Her people were farmers and herders. They grew their own food. They raised goats. They built small brick structures and buried their dead beneath the floors of their homes. And genetically, they were like no one else on Earth. In 2016, Dr. Farnaz Brushaki from Uppsala University in Sweden led an international research team that sequenced this woman's genome, and the results shocked the scientific world. Her people, the ancient Zagros farmers, were genetically completely separate from the early farmers of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, who are the ones everyone assumed were the original people of this entire region. Dr. Brushaki said it directly. This religious group probably mixed less with later waves of people than others in the region, and therefore preserved more of that ancient ancestry. She was talking about modern Zoroastrians, the ancient pre-Islamic religious community of Iran, whose DNA today still carries more of this 10,000-year-old Zagros ancestry than almost anyone else alive. And Dr. Garrett Hellenthal from University College London, who co-authored the same study, was added, "It had been widely assumed that these first farmers were from a single, genetically homogeneous population. However, we found that there were deep genetic differences in these early farming populations, indicating very distinct ancestries. These were not primitive cave people. They were one of the first farming civilizations on Earth. They invented the agriculture that feeds the world today. And their blood, their actual DNA, is still running through the veins of millions of people across Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Scientists call them Iranian hunter-gatherers, or IHG. And here is where it gets truly strange. Their DNA did not just stay in Iran, it traveled east, all the way to South Asia. The ancient IHG genome is actually the primary genetic ancestor of over 1 billion people living in South Asia today, Pakistanis, Indians, Afghans. Dr. David Reich from Harvard Medical School, one of the most respected ancient DNA scientists alive, wrote in his research that Iranian-related ancestry contributes approximately 60 to 65% of the genetic makeup of ancient Indus Valley civilization individuals. Think about that. The forgotten farmers of Iran's mountains are the ancestors of more than 1 billion people, and almost none of those people have ever heard of them. But something was about to arrive in Iran that would change everything. It was coming from the north, across the vast open grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, and it was moving fast. Around 3,500 to 4,000 years before the birth of Christ, a group of nomadic herders began moving out of the grasslands of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. They are called the Yamnaya. They rode horses. They carried weapons. They moved in waves, slow, generational, unstoppable. And wherever they went, sir, they left their DNA behind. In 2015, Dr. Wolfgang Hack from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany and Dr. David Reich from Harvard Medical School in the United States published a landmark study in the journal Nature. Their finding was clear. The Yamnaya were responsible for a massive genetic shift across the ancient world. Their DNA flooded into Europe and parts of Asia, and they were the people history later called the Aryans. Now here is the part that turns the whole Iranian national identity story upside down. Iranians have claimed the Aryan label as their own for over a century. The word Iran itself literally comes from the ancient word for Aryan. The idea of pure Aryan blood is deeply embedded in Iranian cultural identity even today. But when scientists measured the actual amount of Yamnaya, actual steppe, Aryan, DNA inside modern Iranians, it was significantly lower than in Northern Europeans, people in Sweden, in Germany, in Ireland. They carry more Aryan steppe DNA than the people who named themselves after the Aryans. The dominant male lineages in Iran, haplogroups J1 and J2, do not trace back to the Eurasian steppe at all. They trace back to the ancient Near East, to the Zagros Mountains, to the very farmers we just talked about. So the question now has to be asked. If the people of Iran are not primarily descended from steppe Aryans, then who exactly built Persepolis? Who raised those massive stone columns, whose blood actually ran through the veins of Cyrus the Great? The answer is buried in a set of ancient graves that archaeologists almost completely overlooked. In 2025, a study was published in the journal Nature Scientific Reports. It analyzed 50 ancient DNA samples taken from 9 different archaeological sites across Iran. The samples covered a period of more than 6,000 years, from 4,700 BCE all the way to 1,300 CE. Say this is the most comprehensive ancient DNA survey of the Iranian plateau ever completed. And what it revealed about the people who built the Persian Empire is extraordinary. The population that constructed Persepolis, that carved those massive stone reliefs, that built the roads, that ran the Achaemenid Empire, was not a single pure people. They were already a genetic mixture, thousands of years in the making. They carried the ancient Zagros farmer base. They carried ancestry from the early Neolithic farmers of the Fertile Crescent, modern Iraq and Syria. They carried Caucasus ancestry from the mountain peoples to the north. The Persian identity was a cultural and political creation, not a biological one. And here is the detail that hits different when you truly think about it. Look at the famous stone carvings of Persepolis, the relief showing delegations arriving from 23 different nations, Egyptians, Indians, Greeks, Ethiopians, and Central Asians, all bringing tribute to the Persian king. That was not just a show of power. That diversity was in the blood of the builders themselves. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, the man who is mentioned in the Quran as Dhul Qarnayn by many scholars, did not build his empire on racial purity. He built it on something far stronger. He built it on the diversity and unity of many peoples. And the DNA of ancient Iran confirms this completely. But there is one group of people living inside Iran right now who carry something even more ancient than any of this. A group whose blood has barely changed in 8,000 years, and mainstream history has almost completely ignored them. In the mountains of western Iran, there is a group of people called the Lurs. They are not a large community. They are not famous. You will not find much about them in mainstream history books. But in their DNA, scientists found something that stopped the research community completely. The Lurs carry the highest concentration of ancient Iranian hunter-gatherer DNA of any living population on Earth. Think about what that means. While the rest of Iran was being reshaped by Bronze Age migrations, by Greek conquest, by Arab rule, by Mongol invasion, these people in their mountain villages stayed genetically almost exactly as they were 8,000 years ago. Dr. Iosif Lazaridis from Harvard Medical School, whose research has mapped ancient Near Eastern ancestry in extraordinary detail, showed that isolated mountain populations like the Lurs preserved ancestry layers that were completely overwritten everywhere else in the region. They still follow ancient seasonal migration routes with their flocks. They still preserve oral epic traditions that predate Islam, predate Persia, predate written language itself. Their culture and their DNA tell the same story, a story of extraordinary survival. And yet, in the official story of Iranian identity, they barely exist. Their DNA is the oldest story on the entire plateau, and it is almost never told. Now here is where the timeline of Iran takes a violent turn, because there is an event coming in the story, an event that did not just reshape Iran's culture, it physically changed the DNA of millions of people, and almost no one talks about the biological evidence it left behind. In the 7th century CE, where Arab Islamic forces swept across the Persian Empire and brought one of the greatest transformations in Iranian history. What followed was an extraordinary cultural, spiritual, and civilizational shift. Iran became one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning, science, philosophy, and art in the entire world. Persian became the language of Islamic poetry and scholarship. Iranian Muslims built some of the most magnificent civilizations humanity has ever seen. But genetics records everything. John and the bones do not forget. A 2025 study in Nature Scientific Reports analyzing ancient DNA from across the Iranian plateau found that male lineage markers associated with Arabian Peninsula ancestry show a measurable increase in populations from western and southern Iran in the post-conquest period. Dr. Priya Morjani from the University of California, Berkeley, whose research on population admixture dating has been published in PLOS Genetics, has explained this pattern clearly. When she calls it elite male replacement, when high-status men from a new ruling group have children over many generations, their Y chromosome quietly increases in the broader population, even without a full population replacement. The ordinary people of Iran stayed. They converted. They built. They created. But the DNA shifted, slowly, over generations. The Persian poets and scholars who resisted Arabization did it in language and art and culture, and they succeeded. Iran kept its language. It kept Nowruz. It kept its ancient identity. But the bones recorded something else, something that history books leave out. And just when the genetic story of Iran had absorbed that first great shift, another force was approaching from the east. A force so catastrophic that historians still struggle to describe what it did to Iran. In 1219 CE, the Mongol armies of Genghis Khan crossed into Iran. What followed was one of the worst demographic catastrophes in human history. The city of Nishapur, one of the largest and most advanced cities in the medieval world, was destroyed so completely that the Mongols reportedly stacked the skulls of its people into pyramids. The ancient city of Merv, once considered the largest city on Earth, was burned to the ground. Historians estimate that between 10 and 15% of Iran's total population was killed during the Mongol invasions. Some regions lost far more than that, and the DNA recorded it. Dr. Esk Villerslev from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, one of the world's leading ancient DNA scientists, whose work has been published in Nature and Science, confirmed in his research on Central Asian populations that post-Mongol era samples carry East Asian ancestry signatures that are simply not present in pre-Mongol populations from the same regions. In northeastern Iran, these East Asian genetic markers appear at rates that cannot be explained by anything other than the Mongol period. It is a whisper of catastrophe. Quiet, faint, but real. And then something extraordinary happened. The Mongol rulers who stayed, the Ilkhanate dynasty that governed Persia, eventually converted to Islam, adopted the Persian language, married into Iranian families, and disappeared entirely into the culture they had tried to destroy. The conquerors became Iranian, while leaving their genetics behind as a permanent signature inside the people they once tried to erase. Invasion after invasion, wave after wave, and yet something in the Iranian genome survived all of it, something that no army, no conquest, and no catastrophe could fully remove. Here is the thing that makes Iran's genetic story unlike almost any other on Earth. Despite everything, despite the Arab conquest, despite the Mongol devastation, despite Greek armies, Turkic migrations, and Bronze Age invasions, the original genetic core of Iran, the ancient Zagros farmer, the Iranian hunter-gatherer base, never fully disappeared. The 2025 Nature Scientific Reports study found exactly this. Across 6,000 years of samples from 9 different sites, from the Copper Age all the way to the Sassanid Empire, there is a detectable genetic continuity running like a quiet river beneath the surface of all the upheaval. And the strongest evidence for this comes from the mothers. Mitochondrial DNA, the genetic material passed from mother to child, generation after generation, tells a different story than the paternal lines that were shifted by conquest after conquest. Haplogroup U7, a mitochondrial marker that is rare almost everywhere else in the world, is concentrated in Iran and its diaspora. It traces back directly to pre-Bronze Age Iranian populations. It has been passed from Iranian mother to daughter for over 10,000 years. Dr. Wolfgang Hack from the Max Planck Institute noted that in ancient DNA research, maternal lineages consistently show stronger continuity than paternal ones because female populations were far less likely to be displaced during military invasions. The conquerors replaced the kings. They changed the Y chromosomes, but the mothers kept the oldest memory alive. And now, in one small community living in Iran today, scientists found something in the DNA that no model could explain. Something that does not fit any of the migrations we have discussed. Something that points to a history of Iran that has never been told publicly. Along the southern coast of Iran, along the Persian Gulf, in small communities that most Iranians have never visited and most history books have never mentioned. Something unusual lives in the DNA. Population studies of these coastal communities have found genetic markers linking them to sub-Saharan Africa and to South Asia, at rates that cannot be explained by the migrations we have already covered. Y chromosome haplogroup E1B1A, which is predominantly African in origin, appears in these communities at levels that point to sustained historical contact, not a single random event, real, repeated connection across many generations. Dr. Luca Pagani from the University of Padova in Italy, whose research on Middle Eastern and South Asian population structure has been published in PLOS Genetics, has identified these coastal genetic signatures as evidence of sustained maritime gene flow. People arriving by sea over centuries through the ancient Indian Ocean trade network and the later Arab-era maritime trade routes. These are not immigrants. Their families have been in Iran for centuries. They speak Persian. They practice Islam. They are fully Iranian in every cultural sense. But their bones carry a story that the official history of Iran has never acknowledged. And this is what is so important to understand. Iran was never a closed container. It was always a crossroads, a meeting point of civilizations, trade routes, and human movement going back 10,000 years. The idea of pure blood, in Iran or anywhere, was always a political story, never a scientific one. And now, with the most powerful DNA sequencing technology ever built, scientists have gone back to the very oldest bones ever found in Iran. And what they found there changes everything one final time, in the Zagros Mountains, in the caves and burial sites of ancient Iran. Scientists are now sequencing genomes from people who lived between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago, the earliest Iranians who ever left recoverable DNA behind. And the genetic distance between those ancient people and most modern Iranians is larger than anyone expected. Every wave truly did reshape this land. The Bronze Age steppe migrants, the Arab conquest, the Mongol invasion. They all left their mark. And yet, something remained. Dr. David Reich from Harvard Medical School, whose laboratory has sequenced more ancient human genomes than any other institution on Earth, wrote that the ancient Iranian farmer lineage contributes approximately 60 to 65% of the genetic ancestry of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. The forgotten people of Iran's mountains did not just survive, they became the genetic foundation of an entire subcontinent. And here is what all of this, all 10,000 years of migration, invasion, survival, and transformation, actually tells us. The lie was never about the DNA itself. The lie was the idea that identity has to come from purity, that your worth as a people depends on an unbroken bloodline going back to one noble source. The real story of Iran is not about purity. It is about survival, about absorbing every wave that tried to erase you and becoming something new, while keeping the old thread running underneath. Was the Zagros farmer woman whose bones were found in Ganj Dareh. She had no empire, no army, no written language. But her DNA traveled 10,000 years into the future and is still alive inside millions of people today. That is not a lie. That is the most extraordinary truth genetics has ever uncovered. But there is one final piece of this story that has not been told yet. A burial site in the Zagros Mountains of northern Iran, recently excavated. The ancient bones carrying a genome that does not match any known ancient population in the current scientific database. The analysis is still ongoing. The paper has not been published yet. When it is, and scientists believe it will be soon, the origin story of Iran will have to be rewritten one more time, and when that happens, we will cover it. Right here. Next time on this channel, we go to the land between the two rivers, Mesopotamia, the civilization that invented writing, law, and cities, saying their ruins are dust, but their DNA still exists. And what it reveals about the very first people to build human civilization will change how you see the entire ancient world. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. You are exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one.